I'm a huge believer that part of the issues that companies have are breakdowns in communication. I went through a training one time that it said that 85% of companies fail because of breakdown in communication at some level.
What's up, everybody? It's Mason McDonald and Dan Haberkas with the Big Picture Blueprint, and we have a fantastic episode with one of the really well-known people within the real estate investing industry. But before we get into introducing our guest, Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. It's been a productive week. New guys already getting deals, stuff starting to sell. So, excited for the spring.
Heck yeah. Yeah, it's business is looking good. It's February 4th as we have recorded this episode, and it's been a strong start to the year. So hopefully everyone, has maintained their goals through the first month. But Dan, who did we get to the pleasure of interviewing today?
Today we had Ashley Wilson, and for anyone who doesn't know, she's the co-founder of Conference Connect, founder and CEO of Bar Down Investments, an apartment investing firm, and co-founder of Apartment Addicts, and co-founder of House It Look, LLC. She wrote The Only Woman in the Room, and she has been in business for quite a while now, starting in 2009, been involved in over 165 million in transaction and managed about 13 million in construction with both single and multifamily across 1,500 units. So she has her own investments along with the company she owns. She does mentorship and consulting, helping other people get into apartments. She's got quite the background, the master's in leadership and development from Penn State. I could go on, but Ashley knows her stuff. This was a really great interview. I wish we could have talked for 2 hours, but we only had one. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed as much as we did, but it's very tactical. So listen to it twice.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, we're really excited to have this conversation. And a question we like to ask a lot of guests where we see similarities in background is related to education. So I think that in the entrepreneurial real estate investing community, a lot of people discount higher education, college and graduate school specifically. And I say that as a master's educated person that's going to pay off student loans for the rest of my life. Do you feel like the education you received in undergrad and graduate school has been applicable and useful to you in your real estate investing career?
Yes, I do. However, I think my network that I made during those experiences in undergrad and in my master's probably has a little bit more weight than the education itself.
Yeah, I can relate to that for sure, of some of the friends I made and connections I made, through fraternity and grad school and beyond and everything, and just the fun social aspect of it, rather than, learning science and neuroscience and all that stuff that I don't use in my business day to day. But no, we appreciate your response. But Ashley, you've been on tons of podcasts, and but I want to hear what you're up to today, rather than giving your background. What's your day to day? What's your week to week look like as a professional investor now?
My day-to-day is pretty crazy. I have 3 companies. I have Bar Down Investments, Apartment Addicts, and Conference Connect, which launched last year. So in terms of being able to wear multiple hats, I'm constantly going from company to company and making sure that all of the companies are operating well and building, and hopefully not having too many fires that we're putting out, because it's just the nature of the business and nature of any business that you're going to have issues along the way that you have to tackle and be able to hopefully be proactive about it. So, for example, let's say we all know about rising interest rates, insurance rates, and debt. So how do you tackle that in advance? How do you safeguard yourself? Things like that. You have to stay on top of what's going on within an industry. How are people coping? Making sure that you're constantly educating yourself. I am forever a student. I've been a student since day one, not even just in real estate, but in life. I don't think I will ever know everything about any single topic, which is awesome, exhilarating, but also something that you can parlay into other aspects. So I think that's one of the things that you can build off of. But with respect to how it translates in my day to day, there are a lot of transferable aspects of each business that end up in another business that have helped me. So I, make a mistake, let's say in one business, but then I'm able to gain insight into that mistake and prevent it from happening in another business. That's something that is really great to be able to experience. On a typical day, I work anywhere from, on average, I would say from like 7:30 in the morning till maybe midnight, with sprinkled in between some activities with my family. But primarily, I'm balancing between whatever the greatest need is for each business. Fortunately, we have phenomenal teams, and there's a whole art behind having a good team as well. So that's my day to day.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm glad. And I really want to emphasize the fact that you're working a lot and that, this is part of the reality of building anything big. You might not have to do it forever and you might be able to set yourself up down the road, but it takes a lot of work. There's a lot of fires. I was looking at your social media quite a bit before this, and you'd made a couple posts about literal fires at some of the apartment units. And so can you speak a little bit? Because I don't like how rosy of a picture is often painted on podcasts and mostly social media, where everyone's talking about the big deals, the cash flowing apartments, so on and so forth. And this is all true, but it comes with a lot of headache. So can you just maybe speak to that a little bit and how you manage that and keep yourself sane amongst the bad weeks, months, and quarters?
I think with the fires, I mean, why I can smile about it is everyone was fine. Like every fire, knock on wood, that I've had, fortunately, everyone has come out fine. No one's been impacted. Most recently, we had a leasing office fire over the weekend in March of last year, and fortunately, our office was closed at the time. So, um, the to me, everything is figure outable. And it's about staying positive, and it's also about understanding that it really is, well, for me personally, I feel like I'm living kind of the slumdog millionaire's life, where it seems that every single aspect of my life has come full circle. So, I'm on my 7th company that I've created. And when you look back at all the elements that are being put into place on this company, they've all stemmed from previous experiences on other companies. And in the moment, you're questioning, how did I even end up here? How did I go from working in clinical research and development for 3 major pharmaceutical companies to now I am managing multi-million-dollar apartment complexes and a tech company? I mean, it just doesn't even make sense, right? But then when you dive into it a little bit further, you understand all of the details that got you on this path. And I think not being bogged down by any given day and, looking at it through a wider lens. I think entrepreneurs in general have a tendency not to, at least in my opinion, really strong entrepreneurs have a tendency not to celebrate wins. Nothing's ever good enough. That's what drives them. My husband always sings that song, on to the next one, on to the next one, when anything happens to me, because I never feel defeated, I think is the issue. But the double-edged sword to that is I also never feel like the champion either. I always feel that I'm not doing enough and I'm not, at the top of the mountain per se, which I guess is a good thing, because then it pushes you. And it makes you realize that every time you have a challenge, it's just a challenge and you just keep climbing. So, for me, I have tried to be more intentional about celebrating milestones. Before I was very reluctant to post on social media about anything that was good. So now I do that. I also keep a personal log and I screenshot any wins and I put it in there. So if I do ever have a bad day, it's something I can look back on. That's actually something I learned in middle school. It's kind of funny. I talk about all these pieces leading back. Our head of middle school, he created this expandable folder for all of us, and we had to put all the things that we're proud of. So it was the proud of you box that you created, the proud of me box. And I did that with my kids very early on, everything that they're proud of. So when they come home with a piece of artwork, I say to them, okay, well, you can either keep this and put it in your room somewhere, but you have to find somewhere neat to put it, or you can put it in your proud of you box, or it can be thrown away. It teaches them about priorities, but it also teaches them to be proud of themselves too. And then they go through the boxes regularly to have confidence in things that they're doing. And I think that's something that's really important.
Yeah, it's very difficult to balance because on the one hand, you don't want to stop and have a party every time something closes, something comes to fruition, because sales cycles differ from one business to the next. But for Mason and I, a lot of times what we're doing today, we're going to benefit from 90 to 180 days from now. And so you have to be somewhat stoic in how you handle the wins, because, okay, that win is from something I did 6 months ago, and I got to keep this train moving so my business continues, so my employees continue to have, a job, right? And so it is a hard balance, and I can definitely relate to erring too much on the side of not celebrating anything. So I think that that's a good way to go about it there, what you're doing with your daughters and what you learned in middle school. So thank you for that. Now, you mentioned the 3 businesses and the importance of good people on your team in order to make that feasible, to make those run. So how is that structured? Do you have, a management team for each of those that you're overseeing, or what exactly does that look like?
Yeah, pretty much. So it always starts with you doing the business, and every single time you hire, you should be firing yourself. So that's a great sign of how many times you can fire yourself, because that's how quickly you can grow. And there's really 2 schools of thought when it comes to hiring. You either hire for the minimal wage tasks, or you hire for high value tasks. I personally do not believe in one strategy fits all. I think it's situational dependent on which strategy to deploy. But I think if you effectively use both strategies, you can grow very, very quickly. And then one other aspect is it shouldn't be assumed. It shouldn't be assumed that when you hire someone who's good technically, they're also good at people management. That's a problem I continually saw in the pharma industry. They would promote people within, which is fantastic. I'm a huge believer in that, but they promoted someone with the wrong skill set. So what would typically happen is someone who is technically good all of a sudden was overseeing people. And typically people who are technically good are also normally not good people managing. They don't typically have good people management skills. So that creates an issue that stems down to all the employees that they manage. So it's kind of understanding that there could be other ways in which growth can be achieved. Sometimes people aren't looking for a title. They aren't looking for a monetary award for their success. They're looking for other things. They might just be looking for recognition or time off, or the ability to take on additional tasks. It's really about knowing the individual, and it's about building really good teams. I think a lot of people struggle with hiring because, like anything, you have to do it a lot to be good at it and understand what works and what doesn't work. I've been fortunate enough that I've had a lot of opportunities to hire. So now I think I'm pretty good at it. I typically only interview for 15 minutes or less, because all of the legwork that I'm doing, I do prior to the interview. The interview is only confirming my assumptions on someone. And I'm a huge believer in hiring off of personality versus skill set, because if you are, I still take into consideration skill set, but to me, it's not the end all be all. So I would rather take someone who has a good predisposition, who is someone who is able to be coached and trained. And then you can work with them. And if they're smart, they'll learn the skill sets, right? So, and they're, so to me, it's about managing that process. And that's something that I do across all of the companies is we have different teams. And I have done almost every single one of those tasks that people are doing, but now we're doing it on a larger scale. So we need teams across each company to be able to execute. And then we need people to manage who understand what they're doing.
That's a fantastic response. And there's a lot that I want to kind of pick out of there. And I think some of it comes from similarity in background of former healthcare to real estate transition, Lean Six Sigma black belt, a lot of similarities in some of the stuff that we have in our backgrounds. So you have your Lean Six Sigma designation, which Lean is reduction of waste, Six Sigma is, elimination of variation or attempting to eliminate variation. You mentioned how in management as well as building companies, there's not this one size fits all approach, which is similar to healthcare of every patient needs to have some form of individualized level of care, just like every employee needs an individual way of managing them, from acknowledgement in public to acknowledgement in private, and motivation through commissions or bonuses versus motivation through a pat on the back. How do you take those Six Sigma principles of reducing variation amongst your companies, but still able to have that kind of one size fits all? Is there any synergies or efficiencies that you've been able to create building these multiple companies, especially with Conference Connect, which is a little outside of the scope of just, real estate investing? How do you kind of approach it from that framework?
That's a great question. And honestly, I think for my personal experience, I've been able to achieve it because I'm not at the scale of a pharma company that I worked at. So I haven't put the systems into place to know whether or not they would be effective across a company that employs hundreds of thousands of people in the US, millions of people worldwide, right? Because I worked for Sanofi Aventis, GlaxoSmithKline, and Wyeth, which is now Pfizer. So for me, because my companies are of smaller scale, it is definitely manageable. And the way in which we manage it is there are things that promote the elimination of waste, and that is to get to the aspect of growth. There is a benefit to having systems, SOPs, processes, repeatable tasks. I think the integration of technology, especially with COVID being an accelerator of technology, between virtual meetings, virtual work aspects. I mean, all of a sudden now we can do closings virtually, right? And we can do banking on multiple aspects virtually. There's a lot of things that have propelled. There's one aspect there, but then there's the other aspect, which is the need for individuality. And I was a psych major for undergrad. And there was a study that was done that compared two different groups of folks. One group was very homogeneous and one group was very heterogeneous. And it was done, it's been replicated multiple times across different time periods and across different demographics. And they have found that the more homogeneous a group is, the faster in which a conclusion can be drawn to a problem. But the more heterogeneous a group is, the more diverse of a solution is discovered. And most often that solution is a better solution overall, despite the fact that it takes more time to come up with. When you understand that principle and you understand that all businesses don't have to have every aspect have decision making done very, very quickly or even tasks executed very quickly, you can start to decide on a case by case basis, is this a decision where we need a quick decision, or is this a problem that needs a quick decision versus is this a problem that needs a creative solution, the best solution? And when you understand that, that's when you understand who to bring to the meeting. That's when you understand who to recognize by bringing them to the meeting and having those conversations. And I think it's about being intentional. It's about, once again, always being a student and understanding those principles, and then not only understanding them, but practicing them. I think we can all sit around a room and talk about these principles and we can all agree to them, but very few people actually execute upon the principles that they know. And that's the difference. I think, for example, I don't have to meet with every single employee that we have. I don't. I could easily just continue doing group calls. It is definitely more efficient for me. It's a better use of my time, to be honest. But is it a better use of my time? In the short term, yes, but maybe in the long term, no. Because in the long term, maybe that leads to lower satisfaction amongst our team members because they don't feel a part of what we're doing. And that leads to higher turnover. I pride myself in the ability to have people feel that we are working towards something, not they are working for a company. That, to me, is a different mindset. Different person shows up when you say that you're a part of something versus you're doing this for me. Alex Hermosi sent, I'm on his newsletter. I don't get anything for promoting. I don't even know Alex Hermosi, but I highly recommend everyone get on his newsletter. It is phenomenal. And he does this thing called the Mosey Minute. He used to do it every day, but I think he is probably too busy to issue out these Mosey Minutes. And I'm sure he's the one coming up with them. So the other day there was one and it said something, to the effect on, I just lost my train of thought here for a second.
Which we get the Mosey Minute too. I think we're all subscribed to it as well. We enjoy it.
I love his stuff. Yeah, he's exceptional and good at communicating cold, hard truths, I think.
He's incredible. And I remember what it was. Sorry. You can cut that part out, the pause. But one of the things he mentioned the other day was asking, how do you feel that you contribute to the overall company? Going around and asking every single employee, and you'd be surprised at their response, was his takeaway. So we actually have our one-on-ones coming up with all of our staff, and I asked everyone to come prepared to answer that question, and I gave them the question in advance. And I'm interested to see how they think that they're contributing versus how I think. And I think if we have alignment on that, it's going to lead to better results. I'm a huge believer that part of the issues that companies have are breakdowns in communication. I went through a training one time that it said that 85% of companies fail because of breakdown in communication at some level. I'm a firm believer in that. So I think having that communication, we see it all the time in rental properties. People complain all the time about property management companies. I know people who won't even tell their property management company that they want to sell the property. That does a disservice to everyone because the property manager is not then operating and thinking, how best do I operate this property to position it to sell? They're almost working against you. And then all of a sudden you wonder why you're not in alignment and you have so many disagreements and you're dissatisfied with your property management team. I think it comes from the ownership group. I don't think it's the property management company's fault. I think people go vertical with bringing property management in a house, and then they say, oh, it was this bad property management company that caused the issue. No, you caused the issue because you were never transparent. You're transparent with your in-house team, and all of a sudden they're able to operate better, but they're able to operate better because they have better tools. You've provided them better tools. So I think a lot of times we got to look at ourselves before we start pointing fingers at other people. And I think that comes from giving the opportunity to have those open dialogues.
Absolutely. And it's easier to have that in a smaller organization rather than whenever it gets too gigantic. But I mean, a few things I want to pull out of there. Speaking to homogenous versus, heterogeneous, populations. I'm drinking a mug from Japan right now, and it's an extraordinarily homogenous culture. And there's the pros and cons of that, where you get the melting pot in America compared to the homogenous population in Japan. And relating that and being able to understand and have kind of a biopsychosocial approach to employee management is so crucial, because everyone has their own motivations, their own agenda, their own obligations, and their own distractions. I mean, it's the fact that a judge is more likely to give a harsher sentence if they have to go to the bathroom during trial, and understanding that we're all human and trying to connect all of these people into the mission and vision of an organization that at the end of the day is not usually something people are passionate about, whether it's apartment investing or land, development or anything like that. So how do you actually feel like you inspire that shared vision within your company where you've got all these different employees with their different motivations?
That's a great question. I think, I mean, in short, I don't know the answer, but I think it's because I'm not afraid to A, roll up my sleeves, and B, not believe that I'm above anyone in our company. I feel like I'm able to inspire people in our company because they know that not only I've done whatever task they're doing, I've done every single task. I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves and go back and do those tasks. And I pride myself in getting to know everyone and know what's going on outside of working hours. There's a virtual assistant. We have a lot of virtual assistants, and one of our virtual assistants, she wrote me a letter that even just thinking about makes me cry. She was so excited to share that because of this position, she and her husband were able to purchase their first car. And she was so grateful. And she sent me a message on the weekend with a picture of the car and so excited in this really long letter. And that to me is probably one of the most amazing pieces of the position that I'm in. It's not the car. It's the fact that she knew that I would be happy for her, that she would send me a message on the weekend, that she would share this information, because that all could have happened and she never tell me about it. I think what made it so special to me is that she wanted to share that information with me. It wasn't that she was thanking me and that's what inspired me or, made me feel good. It was that she felt that we had a relationship, which we do. And I'm glad she feels that way because I feel that way, that she felt like she could share something that was great going on in her life. And I feel like I have those moments with everyone. And it's about really kind of understanding what's going on and not being so focused on just what's going on at work. I mean, yes, work is a huge part of all of our lives, and you want to make a good atmosphere in which to spend the majority of time that we do during a day doing something, right? There's that piece of it. But there's also the piece that, like, I have another virtual assistant who we were working together, and she's working East Coast hours. And, it wasn't a job that required her to work on those times. And we were on the same page. And I approached her one day and said, hey, just out of curiosity, would it help if you shifted your hours so you could work, better hours for you? Like what would be the ideal time? And she told me, and, productivity went up. That's not why I did it, right? But in terms of then, having someone who wants to stay and work with you and feeling like we have a better connection, I feel like it's more thinking collaboratively and how do we get to the finish line together where everyone doesn't feel, just resentful of what they're doing. But if I need something in an emergency, someone's like, well, Ashley does so much for us. I just feel like if we have that more team camaraderie, maybe it's because I was an athlete. Maybe that's the aspect that I approach it. But I think that having that kind of perspective, I think people appreciate. And then that in turn creates motivation.
For those of you that struggle with management, I really encourage you to go back and listen to those last couple of minutes, because what Ashley demonstrated right there is, it's servant leadership to the nth degree, where if you have done every single job in your company and have done every task within the company and really understand what goes into it, one, it gives you a greater degree of empathy with your employees, and two, it makes it so where your employees know that you're not just, the seagull that flies by, shits on everything, and then walks away, or, flies away. And I think that it's so powerful whenever you can have those relationships with your employee, where I think a lot of people kind of seek that separation for fear of eventually terminating them, or just because they think they're better, or whatever, idea that could be. And the fact that one of your employees who's a VA living in another country had a monumental life moment, and who do you share that with? Like, you're going to share it with your kids or your siblings or your parents or your best friends, and being able to say, I want to tell my boss. And not only do I want to share this information with my boss, I want to share my gratefulness of the fact that Ashley created an environment for me that was, so powerful that it fundamentally changed that person's life, which I think is really beautiful to see. So if you aren't good at management, you can extract so much from those last few minutes. But I'll pass it to Dan to ask our next question.
Yep. And when Mason says, if you aren't good at management, he was talking to me. So I work on taking and implementing this. Now, Ashley, there's a lot more we want to hit on. I want to get to Conference Connect in a moment here. But before we do that, speaking to Bar Down Investments, your apartment investing company, you had a post recently I saw. I forget everything you said, but kind of the summary was that every region and every asset is in a different market cycle. And this really resonated with me because it's driven me nuts these last several years, hearing these broad generalizations about, everywhere being overbuilt or prices coming down everywhere. And I get it. And if you're on a podcast talking about data across the US, you have to do that to some degree. But as an individual small business owner, it can be so niche, right? A lot of these Florida markets that I'm in have gone up dramatically the last couple of years, whereas there's endless headlines about Florida tanking, and it's a huge state. So where do you go? What do you do to get good information about market trends that are specific enough to be meaningful in your business?
Great question. And to be honest, I've dealt with this issue since I got into real estate. I am so frustrated because I think there are a lot of folks that look up to people who can spew off data. Hey, I can memorize data too and spew it off, but my sense of originality would be a 0 on a scale of 1 to 100, right? So I'm going to tell you that when I was in single family and we were flipping houses, everyone said, so that was from 2014 to 2022. And the entire time that I was in single family residential, flipping houses, everyone said to me, oh, you can't find anything on MLS. Everything is overpriced. There's nothing there, no deals to be found on the MLS. Out of every single deal that we purchased, only 3 were not on the MLS. Every single deal, almost every single deal was off the MLS. And I would go in and I would say, you just don't know how to look. Just because we're using the same source doesn't mean that I'm using it the same way that you're using it. And they would, always get confused by that. On the single family side, some techniques that I used were days on market. Anything that was on market longer, that's a low hanging fruit because people are overripe to sell. They wanted to sell when they listed a year ago. They're now in a situation where, they are potentially desperate to sell. How can you tell if they're desperate to sell? Well, how many price drops have they done over that period of time? That's another good indicator on whether or not someone wants to sell. Another great tool to use in MLS is look for a property that's for rent and check whether or not it was for sale before that. People turn to renting their property when they can't sell their property. So then you go and approach them about buying their property. They're just happy they have someone interested. Also, timing of MLS. Know your market. Know when they send out the tax bills. Then look at how many properties are listed when the tax bills are sent out. Go and approach those. So there's just a lot of different ways that you can use the MLS to your benefit. The other aspect is maybe it's your buy box that's wrong, right? So we went into flipping, and when we went into flipping, we looked at a certain price point home and we realized that that was a red ocean. So what we decided to do was, instead of compete amongst 34 offers in a 15-hour period, no joke, that actually happened on this one house we submitted an offer on, we said, how do we get to a blue ocean? Well, what are the things that people don't want to do? People don't want to go after full gut rehabs because they don't know what they're doing. Well, I partnered with my father. He's a general contractor. He's had his own business for over 45 years. We're going to lean into that niche that we already have built into our systems. Number 2 is people don't like historic homes. Well, my dad's had his own business for over 45 years. He would educate all of the inspectors on the codes in our area because he had been in business for multiple market cycles, multiple changes to codes, and could actually disagree with inspectors, and inspectors would then side with my dad because my dad knew historic code. So these are things that we leaned on. We knew what our strengths were, and we were able to position ourselves in that way. The next thing is, we're going to take on all this risk, we're going to take on full gut rehabs, we're going to take on older projects, let's go for a higher price point. Let's go for a price point where now we're competing against home buyers, because home buyers are looking at these more expensive houses. They just watch HGTV. They think they can just, throw up some paint and the house is going to look brand new, when in reality it's not. Most likely they won't even get the mortgage in the first place because, let's say, it has knob and tube wiring and they can't get insurance on the property, what have you. We can come in now and we can offer on these properties. For every 7 offers we made after we changed our buy box, we would get 1, except for 1 week when we offered on 7 and we got 4. So what I'm trying to tell you is that there's a lot of ways that you can still use the same data source, but use it in a different way. Change your buy box, change the way you use that data source to yield different results. So that's on the residential side. On the commercial side, there are so many different strategies because it really is the wild, wild west when you get to commercial real estate. And when I look at market data, I think that there are the macroeconomics, right, that we hear all over podcasts and grandstanding on stages. But then there are microeconomics that are limited to a specific state or city. But then there are economics that are maybe within certain regions within a city. But then there are the actual practice in which things are occurring that may not be able to be captured through some sort of data point. So, for example, if you know that a business is coming in, or legislation is coming in that is going to dramatically impact the operations in a specific area, that technically isn't captured right away on data. The other aspect is understanding where data comes from. So one of the articles that I posted years ago was everyone was claiming that we were going to have this oversupply of housing. And I countered that and I said, I adamantly disagree with that. And I don't care if you guys think I'm crazy, but I'll tell you why I think you're crazy for believing we're going to have an oversupply of housing. Number one is that your data is based off of permits. Permits are an indicator of intention to do work, but not work that is actually ongoing or is completed. So to me, permits aren't even a good indicator to make that assessment in the first place. Number two is if you just look at the legislation, the challenges with providing housing, especially affordable housing, I think we're going to have a affordable housing crisis for a very, very long time. I think the only thing that could potentially change that is changes to legislation or changing in the way in which we construct properties, because just the cost to build is such a huge hurdle to overcome that folks don't they can't afford to build affordable housing. There's not enough tax credits. As much as we'd like to say there is, there really isn't. And I think there are challenges to that. I also think that there is just a huge negative stigma of going into affordable housing in the first place, even as an investor or an investor trying to get other investors to come in. That's a challenge. But then the other side of it is, unless you have these tax advantages or other offsets provided through maybe the debt options that you have on these builds, you still are contending with the operations once that product hits the market. So for example, when you have these over 2x changes to your insurance and you have these dramatic increases to your taxes, the income doesn't offset it the way Class A does. So people will continue to go where their money is treated best. And where money is treated best is Class A new construction. So that's why I believe that we will forever have these issues, because what ends up happening, if you want to look at the full economic cycle of multifamily, are these apartments that remain these D and C class apartment builds from the 1960s, 1970s. Oftentimes, these are bought by newbie investors who don't know what they're doing. They ultimately get foreclosed upon. The banks can't manage them. Half the time, the cities take them over. They take them to the ground, and eventually some new build comes in and replaces it with a really nice Class A if it's in a decent area. And if not, someone comes in and does affordable housing, but in the short term, there's no housing. And at that time and period, most people are only going to a market with an increasing population. So there's always this, behind the eight ball. We're always trying to catch up. And I just don't see, looking at these people who are on CNN and NBC, these headline grabbers and clickbait type folks, really spewing off facts. And unfortunately, the majority of people are listening to those folks instead of people like us who are actually in the trenches and know what's really going on.
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast just talking through everything you just went through there in the last 5 or 6 minutes. I want to comment on a couple things. Strongly agreed with the newbie investors not realizing what they're getting into with older buildings. Even, I'm originally from near Cleveland, and out-of-state people all the time think, oh, look at these numbers. Look at how cheap these buildings are. And I go, yeah, they're 100 years old. They're in an area where you're likely going to get shot. There's definitely knob and tube wiring. That's all over Cleveland. Like, they don't realize the CapEx maintenance and then the difficulty in actually making those projected rents reliably get paid, and the longer I do this, the more I think I want buildings that are younger than me in, B plus or better areas, right? That's how I think about it. So strongly agreed on that point. The upside you get too over the coming 5-10 years of those nicer buildings in nice areas is so much more than a lot of times those stagnant, C area, D plus area properties. Like a lot of the Cleveland properties I'm thinking of haven't really gone up much in value. And even if they have, it's, 10% on a very low number. And then the second thing you said that just really resonated was about people saying you can't find deals on the MLS. Well, what I've found, I just hit 7 years in business, and I remember when I started, people saying, "Prices are too high. There's no cash flow. This doesn't work anymore. It was so much better back then." And then during the pandemic, when interest rates went to nothing and there was so much competition, people said, "Oh man, 2017, 2018, times were good. It was so easy then." And now here we are in 2025, and I'm hearing the same things about 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And it's like, oh, there's always opportunity, but it's always hard because if it was easy, everyone would just go do it. And so there's always going to be people complaining and saying it's possible about any niche, any strategy. And so, like you explained, getting really good at something that maybe you have an advantage in for one reason or another, you have a background in, and you can make it work, right? You can go find deals on the MLS today. So yeah, that was great, Ashley. But we're running out of time, so please tell us a bit about one of your new ventures, newer ventures, Conference Connect.
Conference Connect is a product that was birthed out of problems that I had, as most new companies are. So I noticed that there was an incredible conference that I wanted to attend. It was really expensive to attend. And ultimately, I didn't go to it because I couldn't find any reviews on it or the speakers at the event, even though the agenda looked fantastic. And I thought to myself, wow, it would be really great if there was a platform that you could review events or read events reviews to see if it was worth attending. Coupled with that, I also have personally experienced and witnessed a lack of diversity on stages across the country. I think in part it's because I'm in real estate in the industry that is predominantly male, but also I think that real estate is not the only industry that we see this happening. So I just thought that it would be great if there was a platform that provided more visibility to a more diverse set of speakers outside of speaker bureaus where you have to pay to get behind some, gatekeeper from finding these speakers. And I think a lot of these tours, these different events, we see the same speakers speaking on stage all the time. And I'm a firm believer that if you see someone on stage who you relate to, you're more likely to attend and then in turn get more opportunity out of that, which going back to creating heterogeneous groups creates more opportunity for all because a lot of creation can come out of just meeting and networking. So for those two reasons, I came up with this idea of Conference Connect, where attendees, event organizers, speakers, and even vendors can come on a single platform. They can get all the information of the event. They can review the event. They can find speakers, see what events they've previously spoken at, what events they're speaking at in the future. They can buy their books. They can link to their social media. We are rolling out ticket integration, so you'll be able to buy tickets directly off the site as well, and some other really cool features too. But this month, we've already hit our tracking dates are a little off because we launched on the 7th of February in 2024. But for technically our January month, we're over 10,000 people to the site, which is quite incredible. We're really pumped about that. We've had a lot of momentum. Last year, from February through December, we had over 30,000 people to the site with just 4,000 in advertised spend. So that was pretty remarkable too. So we're really excited about the future of Conference Connect and what opportunities it can provide for people. It is free to create a speaker page. It's free to create an event page. It's really about getting people on there, providing more visibility to these events because conferences are a growing industry. And, as an attendee, you want to make sure you're picking the right ones to go to.
That's fantastic. So conferenceconnect.com, whether you are hosting a conference or looking to attend one, it's a great platform and resource. And Ashley, this has been fantastic. But one more question I want to try and squeeze in, which it'll be on you to have your response short enough, even though it might be a longer response, is coming from healthcare, I've worked with a tremendous amount of really strong and powerful women with high degrees of emotional intelligence, which women typically have a bit higher degree of emotional intelligence than men. What advice can you give to all the women that are listening on how they can succeed in some of these industries that are more male dominated?
I think a lot of women default to, at least in my experience that I've come across, a lot of women default into almost this victim mentality of being not given opportunities. But I take a different approach to it. I actually lean into the fact that I'm a woman, and that makes me unique. That makes me stand out. So for example, when we started investing in the Texas market, um, specifically in Houston, which is really an old boys club, I made a point to always go around and meet every broker. And I didn't bring along a guy next to me. It was me. And that was more to be memorable. And it's funny because once I did bring my team, which actually ironically are a lot of guys, down to Houston the one time, what ended up happening is this one broker said to me, "Oh, we always remember Ashley because she's literally the only woman who's ever come into our office where it was just her. Normally it's like a group of guys and a woman, and the woman's not the lead. So we just always remember Ashley because she just had this very confident personality. She was, very willing to just make a connection right away and not be intimidated by being at a brokerage with literally all men." So I think when you just appreciate the fact that you're unique, you're memorable, and being the person who is making the contacts, you actually stand out more than you do if, there's something to be said about putting someone in acquisitions who fits the role of everyone who's in that market, potentially getting more opportunities. But there's also something to be said about having some unique feature, standout feature. The fact that I got to know brokers, I know them personally, I made sure to know them personally. That I think helped as well because I would reference, their kids or their last vacation. Or, for example, we didn't get a deal one time and we were in best and final, and I sent the brokerage cookies. And they literally called me and they were like, "We have never received a gift from anyone when they lost a deal." And they're like, "We barely get a gift when someone gets a deal. The fact that you sent us cookies and you didn't get the deal was shocking to us." And that's something that was memorable. So what ended up happening? Well, that same week, I got 5 off-market deals from that brokerage. It's about kind of leaning into something that you naturally want to do. Don't second guess yourself. Just be your authentic self, because I'm telling you, if you're your authentic self and you're not thinking, "Oh, well, if I was a typical guy doing acquisitions, I would never think to sell cookies." No, be your authentic self, because your authentic self is what's memorable, and just embrace your uniqueness.
That's awesome. And, you have an extreme amount of competence and confidence in yourself that's been developed over years and years. And you approach relationships in a way that is genuine and authentic and not focused on the transaction, but focused on the person, which ends up having all the downstream effects of everything. So, Ashley, last question. Where can everyone find out more about you?
You can find me on Instagram at badashinvestor. And from there, you can follow any company from there, or you can also go to badashinvestor.com.
Awesome, Ashley. Well, it was an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Everyone, this is Mason McDonald and Dan Haberkost with the Big Picture Blueprint signing off.